I see so many people out here for another edition of the SCF Faculty Lecture Series. Today's talk is going to be presented by Associate Professor of Speech Communication, Jennifer Bieselin. Jennifer received her AA from North Country Community College in Saranac Lake, New York. She did her BA in Broadcast Journalism and Mass Communication at Oswego State University of New York, and she earned an MA in Speech Communication with an emphasis on rhetoric and culture from the prestigious Syracuse University. Jennifer's current research interests include gender inequity and women in leadership. At SCF, Jennifer serves as Speech Curriculum Coordinator, the Student Athlete Mentor Coordinator, and as a mentor to students and faculty. Jennifer has professionally served as a panel moderator at the Florida Communication Association and the Sarasota Film Festival on such projects as Women in Film. She's presented her research on gender inequity at the State Communication Conference, and she's a peer reviewer for a major communication academic journal. In the past, she was a freelance writer for the Ithaca Times in New York and the Gulf Coast Woman in Florida, and she has worked as a radio reporter for an NPR affiliate in upstate New York, reporting on issues faced by veterans of the Desert Storm operation, the first Persian Gulf War. In our local community, she serves as a board member of Wildlife Inc. Education and Rehabilitation Center located on Anna Maria Island, and educates the public about wildlife preservation. She also assists in writing Wildlife Inc.'s quarterly newsletter. Today's talk is titled The 51% Minority, From Lower Wages to Memes and Misogyny, Gender Inequity Persists in the 21st Century. And I also encourage everyone to come back next month for Josh Schulte's talk on the secret life of bats, which is on April 18th. Same day, same time, same room. But please give a warm welcome to Associate Professor Jennifer Bieselin. She's going to tell us about a very pertinent issue in American society.
All right. Thank you so much. I don't use podiums, and my students that are here today, they know that I'm not a big fan of podiums. So firstly, I would like to thank Sue Wire. I just wanted to show this flyer. And Sue, could you just she's like, oh no, all eyes on me. But when I saw this flyer, I said badass for a lack of a better word. I said, this is badass. This is such an awesome flyer. And I hope that I can live up to the quality of this flyer aesthetically. It is awesome. I was so excited. You got me excited about my talk from this flyer. So I wanted to thank you for that. And thank you to Phil and also to Hyun for having this and also for guiding us through the process. Having these types of discourse is so essential to life in college and to our community and to our country. So I want to thank you all firstly. So without further ado, some of the memes that you will see are offensive, so I want to get that out there. They are offensive a little bit later on, but the first one is pretty offensive. Now, this is not a political talk, so do not worry about that. This is not a Republican or a Democrat thing. This is a gender issue thing. So I saw this in 2016, and as a woman, it does not matter what political side of the aisle that you are on. It hurt me. So it hurt me at my core that something like this is something that people laugh at and think is funny, and they will use to disparage women. So just to put that out there, there's a personal reason why I chose to talk about this and also why part of my research is in gender inequity. Firstly, I want to start off with a couple of definitions. The first one is sexism. So it's prejudice or discrimination based on sex, especially. Discrimination against women, basic. Could also be behavior, conditions, or attitudes that foster stereotypes of social roles based on sex. And then misogyny, which we'll get to a little bit later on, is just pure hatred of women. So just keep those definitions in mind as you listen to this talk, and there will be some time for Q&A afterward. And this talk, the 51% minority, so women are the 51% minority. What I'll focus on are wages, medicine, higher education, politics, and practical solutions, and I will be the first to say, I do not have all of the answers. I have made inquiries through my research. I have been taking courses within the Gender Studies Graduate Certificate Program at the University of Central Florida, which has allowed me to present, do panel discussions and moderate different arenas with regards to gender inequity. And again, it's across the spectrum. It's not just in the workplace, but it's across the spectrum and it affects us all. So self-reflexive statement, I said a little bit, I have been taking courses at UCF for a number of years now. I have a personal interest. Yes, I am a woman. Let's get that out there. Yes, I'm a white woman too, which also impacts a lot of how I experience the world. And I also want to say too that this is not a woman against a man type of thing. The issues that I talk about are issues that you all will face in your lifetime, irrespective of your sex or your gender. So it's something that we all will face. These are really family issues. We call them gender inequity, we call them women's issues, but they're really family issues. So we're all going to face some of these issues today. So why should you care? Well, families, usually two people now have to work to be able to make ends meet, and both men and women are in the workforce. It's going to impact you in the pocketbook at some point in time, and it's also going to impact you with the quality of your relationship. So I have here Sheryl Sandberg. She's the COO of Facebook, and she shared a lot of data in a TED Talk, and it's really interesting here because she said if both people, both male and female, are working full-time, that what typically happens is that the woman has twice the amount of housework, even though they're both working full-time, and 3 times the amount of childcare than the man does. So why do you care? Well, because that when that is the case, the divorce rate is increased exponentially. And one way to cut that in half is for both males and females or partners, domestic partners, to share in the responsibility. And she also said that, and again, these are studies done at Harvard, that the partners get to know each other in the biblical sense more when they actually share in those responsibilities. So, hey, there's a reason to actually listen because it does impact you, it does affect you. And as a speech communication scholar, part of my role and responsibility is to establish a civic dialogue, a discourse, and that's what this is, and that's why I'm so thankful that we have the faculty lecture series. A civic dialogue is defined specifically as referring to a dialogue about civic issues, civic issue here, policies directly related, of decisions of consequences to people's lives, community, and in the society. So first, let's start off with the wage gap. If we look at the wage gap, and then I'm going to break it down by race here in a minute, and the Institute for the Women's Policy Research in their report in 2015, the report showed blatant discrimination in pay, hiring, and promotion. And as far as achieving pay parity with that of men, white women in the year 2059, if we continue on the same trend, although we are regressing a little bit, Black woman, 21-24, Hispanic woman, 22-48. So if we look at this, So if we look at this by race, this is the AAUP, the wage gap breakdown by race. And again, just interesting, so what does this mean? So 80%, but if you break it down here, Hispanic or Latina women are the lowest paid in comparison. African American woman, 61%, white woman, non-Hispanic, 77%, Asian woman, 85%, American Indian or Alaskan Native, 58%, and Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander, 62%, and that's to the dollar. So if those statistics don't speak to you, maybe some of these other things will. So the wage gap continues. In the male-dominated industries tend to have higher wages. We know that, and I'm going to show you a breakdown here, a table of different occupations. In a comparison of occupations with at least 50,000 men and 50,000 women in 2017, 107 of 114 had statistically significant gaps in pay that favored men. In some occupations, women collectively are receiving billions less, billions, than they would with equal pay. For instance, women working as physicians and surgeons, which I'll touch on in a little bit, are paid 19 billion less annually than if they were paid the same as men in that same occupation. So this is just a breakdown. I'm not going to go through it all, just see where you might fall. But let's just take here for education, higher education, education administrators. So men's earnings right here, 83, so just say 83,000 a year. And then women administrators in education around, let's just say 65,000. So you can see the pay ratio, even in higher education, is 78%. So you can see that. Lawyers, 76%, marketing, 71%, registered nurses, a little bit closer, 92%, but still the woman. And it's interesting because they'll break down occupations by masculine versus feminine, and that's oftentimes the way they are categorized. And so even in nursing, so males are typically paid. So this is just something interesting. Now, I'm not going to get into that, but interestingly enough, there are some occupations where women make more money. Can anyone guess of all the occupations? No. Someone say, no, that is not it. No. Modeling.
Paid childcare?
Paid childcare, definitely not. They're terribly paid. No. Definitely not. No. No, you'll never get it. You'll never get it. It's a farmer and a rancher.
Really?
Who never get that, right? So yes, there are a few out there, surprisingly. Okay, so why do we care? Why do we care? It matters to families. That's why we care. So equal pay would cut poverty among working women and their families by more than half and add $513 billion to the national economy. Women's priorities, according to the AFL-CIO survey report, this is in 2004, they did a survey of women and working women, and they said basically they want two things. They want a good job, and they want to have good benefits at that job. And so 95% said that, 95% said that healthcare is a priority, right here. 1/3 did not have healthcare. So 1/3 of those working women did not have healthcare. 93% said equal pay was important. 79% agreed childcare was a major issue, and it's especially important if you have a single parent in the household trying to provide for their children and trying to provide childcare for them. And that goes male or female, it does not matter. So that's an issue in general. And then 90% wanted laws to restrain corporate America so that although we do have policies on the books for equal pay, they're really not enforced. So we could learn a thing or two from some other countries that actually enforce the equal pay for both men and women. And then even though this is not about other countries, what's interesting, and which is something that we all should be aware of, how do some of these American corporations act outside of the United States? And this is just one example, but there are many that I found in my research, many examples. So in Mexico, for example, General Motors, AT&T, and General Electric subject female applicants and employees to mandatory urine testing. Does anyone know what they're testing for? Okay, right. Not drugs, it's pregnancy. So to not be pregnant is a mandatory condition for employment. And once they find out if a female worker is pregnant, they do whatever they can to get rid of her. So that's something to be said here for these corporations. So enough of that with wages. Now we're moving on to the academy, higher education, and I could try to fit K through 12 in here because that would be a whole other talk and a whole other day. So I'm focusing specifically though on higher education here. So moving on to the academy. So According to the American Association of University Professors, women are mostly represented in community colleges, and I think we could probably agree with that here for those of us that work here. And they're represented at disproportionately lower ranks within the community colleges. According to the Catalyst organization, Changing Lives, Women in Academics, the decline is actually continuing. And a statistic from this organization is, I think, 37.5% of the faculty that are tenured are women. So it's about 37.5 compared to about 70% to men. So 32.5% of women are in non-tenure track positions, and that is in comparison to 19.6% of non-tenure track for men. Raising a family in academia negatively impacts women's careers going up for promotion. So oftentimes women have to decide, do I want to have a family? Do I not want to have a family? Okay, honey, let's get ready because we need to have these kids during the summer because that's when we're off, or we might be working but we have more flexibility. And then that creates a lot of personal strife within an individual, within a woman. Among tenure-track faculty, like I said, 70% were males, and 70% of males are married with children, but only 44% of women are. Many women in the academy said, I'm just not going to have kids because it's going to be really difficult to move up through the ranks. So they would forego having children, or they'd wait until a little bit later on in life and then have some issues there. The University of Southern California study exposed a promotion gap, and this is 1998 to 2012. 92% of white male faculty were awarded tenure, and only 55% at that institution of women and minority faculty were awarded tenure. What are some universities and colleges doing about this? So there is some hope. We can look at these institutions, and although not perfect, but what are they doing to try to combat or circumvent the system of status quo? So MIT did a gender equity project, and they had a problem. And I don't know if we have this problem here on our campus because I haven't consulted our science faculty, but it might be an issue, I'm not sure. But at MIT, 15% tenured were women, 190, or not percent, 15 were tenured were women, and 194 were men. And they found in this report, it revealed family work conflicts negatively impacted their careers. Women felt very marginalized. There were differences in salary, resources, awards, etc. So what did they do in response? The president of the college, who was a male, good for him, Charles Vest, he owned the problem. He said, yes, I recognize this is a problem. We want to change it. So we actually want to change this. So there are some really good things that are happening in the academy by some leaders that recognize these are issues that we are going to continue to face unless we do something about it. So he owned the problem of gender bias and addressed the root causes. So they did their project. Some initiatives came out of that project in 2000. An equity committee was established at each of the 4 schools of MIT, and out of one of those committees, the National Initiative for Minority Women Faculty, NIMWF, was created. And so an update, this is in 2011, 52 women are now in science. It's a lot better than it was, but they still have a ways to go. But at least they have addressed the problem and they're working on it. I've read subsequent reports, and a lot of the female faculty have said it's still not perfect, but it is better. So that's one of the arguments that the science faculty were making, is we need to make things better so that women want to stay, that they don't want to leave their jobs, that they don't have to choose between working here, getting promoted, and having a family. So in an AAUP study said, why are there so few women leaders in higher education? Women are less well represented among college presidents, community college, universities, college presidents. Also with regards to deans and chairs, and there are more men that are full professors. So just all around, they're less represented. So in this study, questions are being raised about the root causes for the persistence of gender inequity at the highest ranks of academic leadership. So what are some of the root causes? You have to get to the root of the issue to address it. You can't just address the symptoms. Okay, I have a stomach ache, so I'm just going to address the symptom. Why do I have the stomach ache? Maybe I should not have eaten that, cookie before coming here to talk to all of you. Sufficient evidence, they said. There's plenty of evidence. So they know what it is. Now we just need to see, are our institutions going to do anything about it? Lower salaries. Appointments are at lower ranks for women. It's a much slower process for women to get promoted. Lower rates of retention for women and less recognition through the awards. So in this survey and by the evidence that they were able to gather, the awards are oftentimes given more to men and at higher rates than the woman. So the University Committee on the Status of Women, they were looking at 5 questions. And I want you to think about maybe yourself and if you are an educator and some of these questions, and then how would you answer these questions? Because what they did was in this study, they created focus groups, and then we'll talk about some of the themes that they came up with. I think they came up with 4 different themes. But some of the questions are, what are the characteristics that identify a leader in the academy? What do women need to know about leadership? Are women faculty attracted to leadership positions as currently designed? Do women have access to an environment, such as mentoring and access to information, that is conducive to their growing into leaders? And then the last question is, what is it about leadership roles in our institution that could be problematic for women? So, and I think this particular study was done at Johns Hopkins. But they came up with 4 basic themes from this focus group, and I'll try to talk about them. Let me grab this. So in the 4 basic themes, the first one was paths to leadership are slower and often blocked for women. Now, with regards to this first one, so they're slower and often blocked for women, many administrative offices appear to be understaffed and underfunded. And part of the problem here is that oftentimes women are more likely to take on projects and add more and more to their plate, and they're taking more of an informal route. So because they're taking more of an informal route, they're not getting the credits that they need for promotion. So that's part of the problem. And secondly, leadership positions as currently defined are less attractive to women than to men, and possibly are becoming unattractive to an increasing number of men. Now, what's interesting about this is in higher education, they're facing an issue with our deans because, and even vice presidents and presidents, because what's happening is, since we are so underfunded in higher education, they're not being paid what they need to be paid. And they're expected now, that it's like a 24/7 model. You need to be on call 24/7, but they don't get paid like they are working on Wall Street. So what's happening is even men are saying, I'm not going to do this anymore. I have a family. I can't make ends meet. I'm working all the time. What's the benefit of working in higher education anymore? So this specifically is not just a woman issue, but this is a man issue as well. Number 3, women already in leadership roles are not as well recognized as men or appropriately rewarded for their institutions. Again, talking about those informal networks, and part of how we are socialized as females is we don't toot our own horn enough. That's part of the problem. So it's kind of a re-socialization, if you will, of how we communicate our strengths and our abilities. And an interesting statistic here, what is this? So in the data, again, this was a Harvard study. Interesting, success and likability are positively correlated in men. Success and likability are negatively correlated in women. See? It's part of the problem. So if a woman is seen as successful, she's less likable. So that's something that we face. And the last one, number 4, women are more often excluded from the informal network of intellectual leadership than men, kind of like the old boys club. So women feel like, I just can't get in there because we've got the old boys club. I don't feel comfortable. So there's that. So these were the themes. And since we are done with the academy for now, but again, I could talk forever. I've got 10 minutes. I've got 10 minutes here. Grey's Anatomy, we know everything there is to know about medicine, right? So women in medicine. In the article, Increasing Representation, Maintaining Hierarchy, An assessment of gender and medical specialization contend that the number of women entering the medical fields has increased over the past 40 years. So this is really good. This is great, great news. However, they are part of what is deemed, anyway, categorized as less prestigious medical specializations such as psychiatry, dermatology, and gynecology. And they make less money. More prestigious surgery, cardiology, radiology, and pathology. And they make more money. Okay, so what are the causes of the gender discrepancies? Taking a look at it from a sociological perspective, and to all the teachers in here, I am not a sociologist, so I'm just communicating the research that I've found. I'm not trying to step on any toes. But supply, the sociological factor, women are socialized to put others and family first. So that's how women are often caretakers. 60% of the caretakers are women, so a lot of the burden is placed on the woman at home with their family, so whether or not it be their children, but also then when their parents, as they age, that's placed on the woman. So it's partly how we are socialized. But again, there are men too that are caretakers, so just keep that in mind. And then the demand, the structural barriers and interactional expectations, discriminatory factors, practices, in-group, out-group. So the guys are part of the in-group, women are part of the out-group. Sexual harassment and being asked inappropriate questions during interviews because they are women. With regards to sexual harassment, I was reading in the, is it FEOC? Someone help me out here. Is it the Federal EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. So of the sexual harassment suits that were filed in the last 5 years, 2% actually resulted in a positive outcome. And then it was, I think, approximately 20% they were able to win a small sum of money, but only 2% actually ended in winning the lawsuit. So sexual harassment really goes unpunished in our country. So why does this matter also? There are real life consequences to our health. Real life consequences. In part, again, of how women are socialized is that when you're talking about private parts, a lot of women prefer to go to female doctors, but not all. And a lot of men prefer to go to male doctors, but again, not all. So this is in the research, this is generally speaking true, but not always true, so keep that in mind. So some of the health consequences are, for women, because of this, colon cancer is usually detected later than men. Sometimes a woman will wait up to a full year to get a colonoscopy to see a female doctor because there's only one on staff. So it's often detected later. They're more likely to die from it because of that. More women than men have actually died from cardiovascular related causes since 1984. And less than 1 in 5 doctors actually knew this fact. So we know that the #1 killer of both women and men is what? So it's heart disease. So heart-related issues, that is the #1 killer. But women are much more likely to die from it, especially after the age of 60, because women who experience heart attacks are twice as likely to die today because they should know their body. They should know their body. Part of the problem also is that much of the research and hospitals and medicine, they are trying to address this issue. So I'm not trying to say that they are not, but they're trying to address this issue. But that much of the research conducted is comprised of medical textbooks that are out of date, mostly white middle-aged men. And why is that an issue? So why do you think that would be an issue for women? Does anyone know? What would be the issue? A lot of clinical trials have not been done on women, but yet the drugs that were prescribed to women, they have to take. So why would that be an issue? Yes? We are. So we're built differently. So our body mass index is different. Our hormones are different. So women are actually more susceptible to Alzheimer's. And does anyone know why? Because of our estrogen. So I think it's something along the lines of the Alzheimer's patients, it's about 70% women, and that's because of our estrogen. So they're developing drugs, and many of the drugs haven't even been tested on women before. And then so the real life consequences, here we have Dr. Natalie Napitrio-Major. She's an associate professor of pharmacy at Ohio Northern University. She says the lack of clinical trial data for women means we don't fully understand if drugs are as safe and effective in women as they are in men. And oftentimes with drugs, it's the women that are reporting the actual side effects from the drugs. So, and this is just a few other things with the studies, but for the sake of time, you can look at that. The female Viagra study, they were studying female Viagra, but none of the participants were female. Makes a lot of sense. Okay, so Dr. Mazur advocates medical research should not be sex gender neutral or skewed to male physiology. So it's really important that in these clinical trials that you have women in these clinical trials. What's interesting enough, and I just read this last night, in this data from Dr. Mazur, she said in her research, even the animals that are used, and that's an entirely other subject, but the animals that are used in medical research, 80% of the animals are male too. And it's 80%, so keep that in mind. So she said the reason why we need to start including women in these clinical trials is because it matters. It puts women at risk for missed opportunities for prevention. Even with Alzheimer's, the diagnostics that they have for Alzheimer's, again, it's skewed toward males. And so they detect Alzheimer's, which may be part of the problem, much later in females than they do in males. Oftentimes there's an incorrect diagnosis, misinformed treatments, sickness, and death. So it does matter. We need to get women involved in these trials. And again, not to say that they haven't, there have been issues. So you can't have a woman during childbearing years in these clinical trials, but also that is true for men because it's the sperm as well. So if you look at that from that perspective, it affects both the males and females here. So enough about medicine, and I could go on and on for days because I love health communication. Politics and gender. So here's the one about memes. So women in politics. And I just want to tell you, we're going to be talking about memes. And why did I choose memes? So why am I looking? So one of my research papers, I was looking at memes. And then memes serve in the research really as a folklore, as a cultural common sense. Today, we use memes to express our humor, but also the darker side of that is oftentimes we can use memes to, according to the theory on superiority of humor, to also feel superior to other people. It's a way of expressing that feeling of superiority through anger that is expressed through under the guise of humor. But I looked at memes and I asked the question, how is misogyny and sexism reinforced through the cultural production of memes? And how does this affect how society views women? So that was what I was examining, and I was focusing specifically on the 2016 presidential election. So women in politics, we'll get to some of the memes, the categories of memes, but let me see. And I want to make sure that I get this straight. For women in politics, so Zoe Baird was nominated by former President Bill Clinton to be the first female U.S. attorney. And this case really exposed kind of the double standards that women face. So he nominated her. And again, this goes across party lines. So it's Democrat and Republican. This isn't just a political issue that's of one particular party. It's both. It's not just one. So what she did was she hired a Peruvian immigrant couple to provide childcare for her son and other duties. She held their taxes in escrow, but because they were immigrants, they didn't pay taxes. But she held their taxes in escrow. And she earned over $500,000 and was criticized for not hiring an American couple. And she faced a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing. And I read the actual transcripts of everything that was said during that hearing. And I was really upset. And for some of my friends that love Joe Biden, I did not like how he treated her. And some of the questions that she was asked was, how much time did she spend with her child? Is that an appropriate question? So, any male in here ever be asked how much time do you spend with your child? Okay, what were the values of people who lived in her community? So she was asked about other people's values. What did she pay the couple? What was the going rate? Was she being a cheapskate? So Joe Biden said this is big league baseball and I'm the umpire. So he used a lot of sports metaphors and he really heavily attacked her. And then Dianne Feinstein said, are you tough enough? Can you go after crime like a tiger? Okay. So this crosses it crosses the political aisle. So why does it matter? It matters who's in the cabinet. It does matter who's in the cabinet because they exercise great power because they advise our president. And the Department of Justice is comprised of over 91,000 employees. FBI, DEA, INS, U.S. Marshal Service, and the Bureau of Prisons. It matters because they create the policies that affect our lives. So we want to care about who's there. Some further setbacks. So President George W. Bush selected Linda Chavez to be Secretary of State. However, something similar happened to her, and she withdrew her candidacy to a similar incident. However, he didn't fight for her, but he did fight for Clarence Thomas. And I don't know if some of you might be too young to know, but so Clarence Thomas, he was a Supreme Court Justice appointee at the time. He was accused by Yale lawyer Anita Hill from the Department of Education of sexual harassment. She was aggressively questioned by 14 men. Republicans attacked her character and invaded her privacy from youth to present, and his private life remained intact. He did not get questioned. And the Democrats were they were by the political party. They said, why didn't you do anything about it? Why didn't you stop them? Why didn't you stop them from attacking Anita Hill? And they just didn't. Other political scandals, we have Spitzer and Sanford. So they are the wives of some politicians. One was the governor of New York at one time, Eliot Spitzer, and the other one was the former governor of South Carolina. And Jenny Sanford and Spitzer, and the wives face a double standard. Oftentimes wives are judged by their husband's behavior. So both of these guys, so one was with a prostitute and another one, he had a girlfriend on the side. So Spitzer, the double standard that she faced was she stood by her man. And all the women were like, damn you, you stood by your man, you're not a woman, you gotta leave him. You gotta leave him. Sanford left her husband. And in fact, what did she say? I've got this here. If I can find. Sanford was quoted as saying, after she left him, she said, not only will I survive, I will thrive. And boy, they came down on her. They said, she is a real bitch. She's a cold-hearted bitch. No wonder he cheated on her. No wonder. So you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. You stay or you go, you're really screwed. Doesn't matter. So now moving on to what we've all been waiting for, the memes. In the 5 minutes that I have left so that we have a little bit of Q&A. But again, so these memes are highly offensive. However, I selected these memes from Facebook. So they were created on the internet and then they were distributed through Facebook, but there were far worse memes than this. So actually, the memes that I'm showing are just far, there are different websites that you can find different memes, so by far, these are a little bit less offensive. So the themes that I came up with, the categories that I came up with, and this is still research in process, but the first one I identified, I'm doing a content analysis, a rhetorical analysis, and then I'm doing a content analysis on the different themes from the memes that were generated during the 2016 presidential election. So the first theme is female objectification, and that's also body shaming, so objectifying the female body and also body shaming. The second one is woman as sexually inadequate, woman as old hag, and then woman as bitch. So the first one, objectification, body shaming. So if we look here, we have Joe Biden. He's coming from her behind. Hey, lady, need your server wiped. So this is complete objectification. There's some body shaming in there. And this was just pretty a mild meme in comparison to others. The second one, which is very common in political rhetoric, is woman as sexually inadequate. So a woman can't meet the needs of her husband, and then he's going to look elsewhere. So this is another, Monica 2016, I got the job done when Hillary couldn't. So this is another common theme found amongst the memes. Woman as old hag. This theme is as old as time itself. And so again, we have ageism here, but this is a common theme. They're really trying to focus on she's a woman, she's old, they objectify her body, she's every part of her body was ripped apart as well. And then the last one is woman as bitch. So Trump's greatest accomplishment, he kept this bitch from becoming president. So again, a very common theme among the memes. So where do we go from here? Again, I do not have answers. I have some other ideas that we could mill about, and I have some questions that I could even ask you all. Maybe you have some better ideas. But what I do know is there are some practical solutions that we can do individually and also at the state level and at the national level as well, at the federal level. We need to get our institutions to acknowledge the problem. So how do we go about doing that? So getting institutions to acknowledge the problem. Demand old policies be revisited and change them if necessary. We need more family-forward policies. So even here you have a family. If you have one child, it's, what is it? Who has a child in here? Not many. So how much is it a month? 500? 600, okay. That's so much money to have a child and to try to give this child health insurance. So we need more family-forward policies. The Fair Representation Act, check that out because it's interesting. It's not about political party. It's about having more representatives in your area so that it's not red or blue, but it's purple or pink, so that you have people that are actually representing you and the issues that your community is facing. So check the Fair Representation Act out. Much of the media is perceived as truth tellers. Call them out when they perpetuate gendered stereotypes of political candidates. Don't take part in the disparaging of women, or men for that matter. Create programs to support and promote girls and women in education, disrupting fields that are traditionally masculine. So interestingly enough about the STEM, just a little side note, a lot of women going into STEM, so they'll go into STEM and then they actually end up leaving STEM because the conditions aren't suited to raising children. The conditions aren't suited to some of the needs that women face that are different than men. And sit at the table. Sheryl Sandberg, COO of Facebook, she said, women need to sit at the table. Don't sit beside the table, don't sit behind the table, but you need to sit at the table. You need to have your voice heard. You need to sometimes toot your own horn. And then on the individual level, choosing partners that actually share in the responsibilities and the household duties and the cooking and the shopping and the childcare duties, because it just might save your marriage, or if not, make you happier in your marriage while you're in it. So what did we cover? We covered a lot in the 40 minutes that I had: wages, higher education, medicine, politics, and then some suggestions to combat this gender inequity. And I know this is cheesy, but I do love memes. That's why I study memes, because I do like them. They do have their place. And what I ask all of you now is, will all the women in this room please stand up? Please. Please humor me. All the women, please. Come on. Come on, ladies. I know. I say a fierce thank you, especially the older women. I'm 42. Anyone that's older than me, a fierce thank you to paving the way for a woman like me and the other woman in this classroom. Thank you so much. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Professor Bieselin. We're going to do a little Q&A, and I'm going to get Venice on the screen here. And the way we're going to do this, because I assume Venice probably has quite a few comments. So we'll start here while I get Venice queued up, and we'll take a question here, and then we're going to let Venice have a question on their side. So watch the monitor, and if there are no questions there, then we'll keep it here, but I'm sure last time there was a good back and forth. So let me get them queued up, and if anybody has any questions.
Any questions?
5 minutes, so we'll take a few more.
As young parents raising male children, in this day and age now, new children, what can they do? Because a lot of this is in the schools. I'm talking about the little elementary schools and everything. So you want to raise your son up to have a different worldview. A lot of things we've been talking about today are very deep-seated in me.
Yes. Yeah. Gosh, I don't have the answer to that one. I do not have children, so people that do would be like, you shouldn't be talking about that. But what I will say is that it does all start at home. So children model the behavior of their parents. And so in choosing, so for those of you that don't have a partner yet, choose wisely. So some of us didn't choose so wisely the first time around. And second, or third or fourth, whatever it might be, choose a partner wisely. Choose a partner that shares in the responsibilities, that actually sees you as an equal. So it starts at the home, and then the institutions, we have an effect over the institutions and what they teach and how they teach it in the programs that they have.
Yeah, that home is certainly that foundation, but also when you're having conversations and you hear those disparaging remarks, check it right then.
Yep.
Shut it down.
Yep.
And at least you're planting that seed in them that says, okay, that's not right.
Okay.
It's about having that line of communication open.
Absolutely. Communication is key. So Julie, and then Isaiah. Yes, Julie?
What would be your advice to younger women who humanize each other by using the words bitch and other things like that when young women?
So what's interesting is in the research, it's called internalized misogyny. When women do that to each other, there's some research, I think it's by Bell Hooks, and she talks about how that oftentimes, in her language, she uses the oppressor, but people will take on the attitudes of the oppressor and then treat each other that way and try to throw each other under the bus. And so that is an issue. And what I would say to that is collaboration is key, and try to, as much as possible, resist that temptation to be that way. But that's such a deep conversation to have, and it is quite prevalent. And in my research, it's woman betraying other women, and that was a common theme in the research. Okay, so the gentleman and then Isaiah, yes.
So the slide you showed with the pay disparity between men and women in the same occupation, it was like 60 women get paid 60% of the pay rate, 70% of the pay rate of a man. The question I had was, if I run a business with say 100 employees and there are 90 men and 10 women, why wouldn't I fire the 90 men and then hire 90 women at 70% of the same pay rate?
That's an excellent question, and you are not the first person to ask that question. That comes up all the time, and it's said because the status quo needs to be maintained, and so they just don't at this point in time. But because the status quo needs to be maintained, that they're willing to pay the extra. It's just companies have not really been forced yet to look at the inequity in pay, but now that they're being forced to do it, there might be some changes, but that is a very good question. A lot of researchers ask that question, and the best answer they can come up with is to maintain the social hierarchy, and the status as male being higher and the woman being lower.
In California, I don't want to...
No, it's okay.
But they just passed a law, actually, that says there has to be X amount of women on the board and X amount of men, just to make sure that they make up together. So I think it was just passed like last year, so it'll be interesting to see where it goes moving forward.
California they have passed bills, policies like that, and that's why it's so important for your voice to be heard. If that is something that is important to you, that policies like that get put in place. So I know that Florida, we have one of the weakest policies, although the pay is, interestingly enough, it's not fairly equal, but I think it's like 87 cents to every dollar a man makes, but partly it's because the wages are so low in Florida. You can't get much lower. But we're pretty unequal as far as pay in the state of Florida. But yes, that's excellent. Excellent point. Okay, Isaiah?
I was responding to the first question about how can we train our young sons, to respect women more. And I would go back to what you said about make sure you sit at the table as a parent. When they have the PTA meetings and any events at the school that your child is in or your grandchild, make sure you attend those events or send a representative, a grandparent, to attend the PTA meetings and to become very, very involved in all of the activities at that particular school. So we have to sit at the table.
Yep.
I had to do that I have only one son who's 25 years old now, but I had to actually sit at the table at the schools he was attending, or send my mother or my father or someone else.
Venice, do you guys have any questions down in Venice? Michael, Professor Rogers.
No, I think he's leaving.
I just feel like we're ignoring him. I want to give him a shot there.
Hey Phil, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes, we do have one question. First, I'd like to say thank you to the presenter. Thank you, Jennifer. It was a wonderful presentation. We do have a question.
Okay.
So, if women's equality is in a large part due to being the nature of child care and women's opportunity, shouldn't the solution be to not have
Michael, could you either repeat the gist of the question or have him repeat it again, maybe closer to the microphone?
He's basically saying that if it is a disadvantage for women to have children in the workforce, then couldn't the advantage be to not to have kids at all?
I'm attempting.
End of civilization.
You're all done. This is it. This is it as life as we know it. No more children. So, in all honesty, a lot of women are deciding not to have children, or they're waiting and then they can't have them. So that is an issue, but remember, you're placing the issue on the woman. But there's two that are involved there. So there's two. So these issues are not just women's issues, like I said at the beginning, they are family issues. And so it does not just impact the woman, but it also impacts the man as well.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. One last question we have here is about, we're going to go back to the 1960s, so maybe even Professor Travis wants to comment on this. John F. Kennedy signed into law in 1963 the Equal Pay Act, which was supposed to close the wage gap in America, as it makes it a crime to pay a woman less than a man for the same job. Why do you think the Equal Pay Act from 1963 has failed to close that gap?
Because it's not enforced. It's not enforced. It's on the books, but it's not enforced. And actually companies like, or not companies, countries, I think it's Iceland, someone correct me if I'm wrong, someone told me about this. They actually are enforcing it, and they're going to start to fine companies if they don't bring the pay with women and with the pay for women up to the same level as men. They're going to start to fine them money. So I imagine if they started to fine institutions and corporations for not paying equally, that they might actually start to get some equal wages there. But that's why it's not being enforced. Anastasia, thank you.
Is that the answer, though?
Yes. Anastasia?
It's really important too. Like the head of the National Institute of Health is now a woman, and she was the one who said that women are included in clinical trials because it messes up their data curve. You know, we just make it not a pretty line anymore. But I was also really looking at the reports that are coming out of the National Institute of Health. Yesterday, a big report came out about child mortality and stillborns. And that's something that people don't even want to talk about. Yeah. That women that have to deliver a child that they know is not viable, that is dead as soon as before it even came out in utero. We're talking about how do women deal with this emotionally and psychologically and socially. And they're also talking about how can you prevent it, because we are included in the clinical trials, and yet we're given medication even when we're all pregnant. And I think that women really do need to sit at the table. So if you see a woman who has the opportunity to call these issues into focus, please support her almost like you would a man. That's all I can say.
I think you had a question right back there.
Yes.
I think I read it was in the 70s or 80s in Iceland. Most of the women in the entire country went on strike.
Yes, 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 that's true.
And I've actually been to Iceland. Like 90% of the country lives in Reykjavik. So like the whole country is in one town, and like all the women just went on strike and like, I'm not gonna work until you pay me more. So like for like 30, 40 years now. So we could all go on strike.
There is that. So it's a lot of the Scandinavian countries too, there's greater equality and with regards to wage there and as sharing household responsibilities, all of that. So I saw a hand here, there, and then Julie, sorry. Elisa?
You have towards the woman racial pay wage. Well, I do understand that we all want to be equal to the men and pay wage for women. How is that different between the races? As you mentioned that white women have at least a 71%, and each job pay wage is lower. And another question is about what you mentioned about the Mexico urine testing. How would you gear that towards getting a comfortable job with comfortable requirements?
So with the urine testing, I'll start with that one first. That was in Mexico, and that would not be legal here. So that would not be legal. But with regards to the races, the differences in races, that is an issue that various women groups are addressing currently. And it's a matter of, again, personal, but not fully placed on the personal, but our institutions to create committees so that we have equity, so that we're actually recruiting and we're hiring people that actually represent our students within the workforce. So that is absolutely an issue, and it's something that scholars are trying to address, but corporations and institutions are really slow to listen. So it is an issue. Okay, so I saw one, and then Julie, yes.
Going back to just the implementation of making companies pay fines if they don't pay equal wages. What do you do if they just decide that due to it being over a long period of time, it's easier just to pay a one-time fine than to just pay their women more? What do you do if they just decide it's easier to pay the fine and keep women's wages lower?
That probably wouldn't happen because in the countries that do enforce that, that's not happening. So it probably wouldn't happen. Not saying, I saw Julie.
So let's take maybe two more.
Okay.
We started a little late, so let's take like two more, and then we'll finish it up.
This is a question, but recently, within the last week or two, there have decided that there's only 6 countries in the world that have true gender equality. That's outrageous, and we are not one of them.
Yeah.
Do you know which ones they are?
One was Iceland, I believe one was Denmark, and I think the other was Sweden. I'm not sure what the other 3 were.
Scandinavian, yeah. Anyone else? Dennis?
I just had a comment on, as far as you always look at what could possibly, make things better. And a lot of it, I think, historically did go back to the nurturing role and the child rearing. But I think as we go forward, the one thing that I've seen just in my life and raising my kids and being a co-parent and everything, the more flexible a workspace can be as far as time for the employees, and that's men and women. And then also when children are born or adopted or brought into the family, to have the medical leave available to take the appropriate amount of time for both to me, long term, that's the thing that has to change, and that has to be a better way of not just making it better for women, but I think you'd start to see too, men would be much more willing to take on that role if they had that flexibility.
Yeah.
They're very afraid of losing their job too if they take too much time. I have friends who work at IMG, they have medical leave, they have all this stuff set up, but they're afraid of getting passed over for promotions because they're afraid of taking too much time off.
And I thank you for saying that too, because this is not just a woman's issue, this is a family issue, and what's good for women is good for families, and that means men too. So thank you, because we need both. So we need both males and females to be able to work together to change some of these policies so that we can have better working conditions, so that we can have a better quality of life. Because the standard of living has continued to decrease. People have to work more and they have less time for their family and for their responsibilities, their home life. So it's not just a woman's issue, it is a family issue. So thank you for pointing that out.
All right, I think that should wrap it up. Thank you again.
Thank you for coming. Thank you so much.
Dr. Jennifer Bieselin, Objectification, Interpersonal here at SCF.
Yeah.
Thanks to Venice, Professor Rogers. Also, don't forget, I believe it is on the 18th, one of our science professors, Josh Schulte, will be giving a presentation on the secret life of bats. It'll be in here, same time, same bat channel. Everybody, thank you for coming out. It's going to have such a great turnout, so thank you. Don't forget to sign up.